new video. It's been a few weeks since my last video. I'm very sorry for that. School has been very busy these last few weeks. But anyway, I'm happy to be back and have a discussion video about this beautiful card, Eater of Millions. So, Eater of Millions has been around for quite a while now. It's actually, it got introduced to us back in early 2017 in Raging Tempest, if I recall correctly, and that was the last core set we got to the TCG before we got into Link format. And that's actually very interesting when we get into the effect of Eater of Millions later. Anyway, when it got released in Raging Tempest, a lot of people disregarded this card. They thought it was kind of funny, but still considered it to be kind of a pack filler card and a bit of an awkward choice. But I immediately liked this card, just because I thought it was a bit gimmicky, and I really like gimmicky cards because they provide fun gameplay. But I also, one of the first few things I thought when I saw this card was, well, this is just a power-crept Neo-Spacian Grand Mole. And there are definitely a lot of similarities, because Eater of Millions is able to get rid of boss monsters, Grand Mole is able to get rid of boss monsters. But before I get into all of that, let's just look at the card Eater of Millions. So this card is a dark attributed level 1 fiend monster with the effects cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by banishing 5 or more cards from your hand, field, and or extra deck. And these cards have to be banished face down, and this card cannot be special summoned by other ways. This card gains 100 attack and defense for each face down card. This face up card cannot be attributed nor used as a material for a fusion, synchro, or Xyz summon. Once per turn at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that monster face down. So that's a lot to take in, actually. First of all, banishing those 5 cards, you can do 5 cards, or you could banish like 15 cards. But most of the time you'll probably be banishing cards from your extra deck, because you won't be taking away any of your advantage. Let's say you banish cards from your hands, you're basically losing card advantage, which you don't want. So most people usually banish cards from the extra deck so they don't lose card advantage. However, it has happened before that, like for example, you can have your skill drain up or an Imperial Order, and you also stun yourself. Like with Eater of Millions, you can remove your own stun cards, like Imperial Order or skill drain, to remove them from the field by banishing them face down, and then get all of your cards in again. So there are definitely some flexible options with the banishing. So the card gains 100 attack and defense for each face down banished card. That means that he can get himself up to like 1500 attack, but with very popular cards like Pot of Desires, you can pump this guy up to like 2500 easily, which isn't anything to scoff at, especially when it's so easy to bring out onto the field. So like I said, this card was introduced to us just before Link format, and that's very interesting because, as you can see here on the card effect, this card cannot be attributed or used as a material for a fusion, synchro, or Xyz summon. So at that point we thought, well, basically it's only going to stay on the field and you can't really do anything else with it. But now of course we know that you can link summon this away, for example for a Link Haribo, which is a pretty nice card to go into during main phase 2 after you've removed the threat with Eater of Millions. So yeah, this card was a nice introduction into the Link format, and yeah, I really like this card still. So like I said earlier in this video, Neo-Spacian Grand Mole and Eater of Millions have a lot of similarities. However, Grand Mole is worse in almost every aspect. You have to normal summon this, and you don't have to normal Eater of Millions. So with Eater of Millions, you can still use your normal summon for cards like Trickster Candina or Alistair the Invoker, for example, whereas you can't really do that with Grand Mole. Now, additionally, the banish effect of Eater of Millions seems to be a lot stronger than the bounce effect of Grand Mole, because you know, bouncing a card back to your hand, other than when it's an extra deck monster, you're still just giving card advantage back to your opponent, so it doesn't really get rid of the threat permanently. So yeah, we can definitely disregard Eater of Millions. I'm sorry, Grand Mole, because it's nowhere near the power level of Eater of Millions. So, in my opinion, Grand Mole could get back to 3, because then it might actually be able to make a Grand Mole Eater of Millions deck. That might actually be interesting and very annoying as well. But speaking of similar cards to Eater of Millions, a lot of people in the past played Thousand Eyes Restrict, which was used as spot removal as well. Like, you could summon Thousand Eyes Restrict very easily with Instant Fusion, bringing out Thousand Eyes Restrict, then eating away one of your opponent's monsters. However, you wouldn't be able to attack with your other monsters besides Thousand Eyes Restrict, so that definitely brought some restrictions to the use of this card. On the other side, Instant Fusion could also bring out cards like Invoked Raijin, or any fusion monster between level 1 and 5 to go into other possibly Synchro or Xyz plays, and in the past Norden as well, of course. So yeah, there was definitely a very popular choice, Instant Fusion and Thousand Eyes Restrict. So it gave more flexibility, but it also ate up more main deck space and extra deck space, obviously. So Eater of Millions does have an edge in some aspects of that as well. Now, besides similar cards like Restrict and Grand Mole, we also see that Eater of Millions is a dark monster, which is very good for consistency reasons with cards like Allure of Darkness, for example, and like I mentioned, Pot of Desires, boosting this card's attack up to like another 1,000 points. Some cards get a good use out of Eater of Millions being able to banish cards, like Grand Maju the Aiza. We've seen Grand Maju the Aiza decks perform pretty decent at YCS or regional events. This card can just banish like 15 cards from your extra deck and then boost Grand Maju the Aiza to crazy levels of attack. And it's a really fun deck concept, actually. So again, we see the flexibility of Eater of Millions in that regard as well. Why is Eater of Millions so widely used in Trickster decks, for example? Basically, Eater of Millions is a very easy spot removal card, like Thousand Eyes Restrict used to be. You can basically summon it and you force your opponent to deal with the Eater of Millions, because if they don't, you're going to banish more monsters during your next turn and your next turn. So it's an instant threat, being able to get rid of a lot of boss monsters that your opponent might have invested a lot of card advantage into. So you force your opponent to use their boss monster effects against Eater of Millions, and then after they do that, you are free to make your moves with your regular engine, like your Invoked engine, like your Trickster engine, like maybe a Subterror engine. So it's a really nice lightning rod in that regard. It's very similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar to why a lot of decks play hand traps. Obviously, it's to stun your opponent, but a lot of decks don't have the disruption that Ghost Ogre or Ash Blossom have to offer. So these hand traps are basically just a supplement to a deck not having any stun interactions during your opponent's turn, and Eater of Millions is able to offer spot removal, which a lot of decks might not have access to. But like I said, we've got things like Linkuriboh to link into very easily and get even more advantage out of Eater of Millions. But I think that Eater of Millions is going to be an even better card in the future. A few weeks ago we got announced a new card, namely Relinquished Anima. So this card is, I think it's a Shonen Jump promo. I think the OCG is getting it very soon, but since it's a Shonen Jump promo, it could be quite a while before we actually get it into the TCG. But this card, in combination with Eater of Millions and any Kaiju, could really be an amazing spot removal engine. Let me explain. So, for example, let's say you go second and you've got one Kaiju and one Eater of Millions in your hand. you're going up against like 2 or 3 boss monsters. So the first thing you do is you summon Eater of Millions. After that, you summon the kaiju to your opponent's field by tributing a boss monster. Make sure you are summoning your kaiju in front of an empty extra monster zone. I'll explain later. So you go to the battle phase and you eat one of your opponent's boss monsters. Then you go to main phase 2. At this point you've removed 2 threats from the field. One by eating with Eater of Millions, and one with the kaiju you tributed over your opponent's monster. Now you can link away the Eater of Millions into relinquished anima. And since you put your kaiju into a monster zone in front of an extra deck monster zone of your opponent, you can now eat the kaiju you gave to your opponent with relinquished anima. So after you've done this, you've got a relinquished anima on your side of the field, which his attack is ranging anywhere between 2200, which is Gamaseel's attack stats, and 3300, which would be Jizukiru's attack boosts. So yeah, you've got a nice boss monster in the field with decent attack stats, and you got rid of 2 of your opponent's boss monsters in actually a very easy, accessible, and generic way, with just 1 Eater of Millions and 1 kaiju. So yeah, I think that Eater of Millions has a lot of potential now, and it will have even greater potential in the future. This card isn't going to be banned anytime soon, even though it's kind of a bit weird that Grand Mole is still on the ban list, but this card is very safe, it's very cheap, and I really think more people should consider playing this in either their main deck or going second in the sideboard, because a lot of people don't have money to buy evenly matched, obviously, but they do have money to buy some kaijus and an Eater of Millions, which can get rid of a lot of threats. So guys, thanks for watching so much. I hope you enjoyed this discussion on Eater of Millions. I hope I convinced you of some of the pros of Eater of Millions. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thanks for watching, and see you later.